I actually came across a poem that I've never heard before, and yeah, I am almost embarrassed that I haven't actually heard it. But it's Stopping in the Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. I'll read it to you. I'm not brilliant at reading poems, but I'll read this to you. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have a promise to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Now, I read that, and I thought at first it was a very simple poem. But then my analytic brain kicked in, and I'm thinking, is there another meaning to this? And it is one of those poems that can be read differently. And I think it can all also depend on where you are in life to how you read the poem and what place you are in yourself in mind. I've written some notes down here because I can't actually remember everything that I've written down. So do forgive me for looking down here and reading from my notes. But this is what I've come up with. Like I said, it's one of those poems people love to analyse, and sometimes I think they analyse it too much. And that's the funny part of it, because I don't think Robert Frost himself, who wrote this poem, anticipated it or wanted it to be analysed word for word like people have done. He intended it to just be simple like he actually wrote it, but there are critics out there and there are analytics out there. I'm a bit like this myself. In fact, I've done some research on Robert Frost as well, and he does actually go to say that he hated it when people overanalyzed his work. He wanted his poems to feel simple, natural and honest, and not complicated puzzles for critics. Those are his words. But that, I think, makes this particular poem quite interesting, because some people will read it as nothing more than a quiet moment. A man stops and watches the snow fall in the woods. His horse wonders what's going on, and after a peaceful pause, he continues and goes home. Simple, beautiful, and exactly how Frost intended his poem to be written and read. But then you've got the other people, a little bit like myself, I must admit, that will analyse it and go a little bit deeper. So these are the few notes that I've written on me analysing the poem. The woods become a symbol. The journey then becomes a metaphor. And the final lines hinting at something much deeper, because he does go on, repeats those two final lines. And miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Now, why did he write those last two lines twice? I think somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew when he wrote the poem that there was a deeper meaning to what he was actually saying. So suddenly that line becomes something very different. It's the same words, but the change, as you might change through your life, if you understand what I'm saying. You might read this poem and be like myself. When I read it and I liked the simple version of it because I'm at peace with my life right now. But I can understand if somebody wasn't at peace with their life and had a few burdens in their life, they would probably read this poem in an entirely different way. And maybe, yeah, I'm going back to my notes here, so sorry, I'm looking down. And maybe then that's why Frost was quite frustrated that people tried to force one meaning or the other. Because I don't think anybody is actually wrong, and I think both meanings are correct. It's meant to be written as a simple poem, but there is a deeper meaning to it. And I think if I go back to this poem in a year from now and I have a different mindset, my mind is thinking differently, or I've got some kind of trauma happening, I might read that poem entirely different each time I read it. And it's funny how a few lines written a century ago can find its way into your life exactly when you need them. It's interesting. Go away, read the poem. Don't analyse it too much because, I've actually got a whole load more reasons here of what I've written down. For example, when life is calm, you can read it as a lovely winter moment, a pause to appreciate nature, and a great reminder to keep going. Very peaceful and very simple. Then when life feels a bit heavy, the same lines can suddenly feel different. And these are my other notes that I've wrote on the flip side. The woods look like an escape. A dark, deep sounds soothing, dark and deep that sounds soothing. Miles to go feels more like a weight of responsibility, reminding you that you've got responsibilities and you've got to keep going on your journey. Then I think as you reflect on it as you get older, it could be the fact that you could be looking back on a promise, looking back at a journey from behind, accepting the rest is still ahead of you. So that's 16 lines of his poem is a summary of your whole life. So you're looking back on your life. And then there's the other one that I've wrote here. When we're overwhelmed, the forest can feel like a place you wish you could stay. A moment of silence, a slowing down, and a freedom from pressure. So yeah, the poem does change as you change. The words don't change and the poem doesn't change. It's you that's actually changing. So it's a very interesting poem, and I can understand why it has been analysed to the depth that some people have actually analysed it. And I think that's why Frost has actually become quite frustrated that people have gone a little bit too deeply into the poem and analysed it a little bit too much. But that's what I like to do. I love to read poems. I like to read it as I read it, and then my analytic brain switches in and I start going into it bit by bit, word by word. And I think this particular poem was just meant to be read as he wrote it, but I still question, why did he say those two lines at the end twice? There's got to be some other meaning when he wrote this poem, why he wrote those two lines, twice at the end. And miles I go before I sleep, and miles I go before I sleep. Sleep meaning permanent. Does that mean death? Or does it mean he's just tired and he's going home to sleep? Very interesting. Hope you enjoyed that.